One of the ways to assess for a person's judgment, cognitively speaking, is by asking a scenario based question. So you could ask the person, let's say you walked into a kitchen and you found the tap flowing into the sink was overflowing, and there was water all over the floor. What would be the first line of action? If the person gives the correct answer, which is the turn of the tap, you can say that the person obviously has displayed common sense. But if a person does not say that and gives another answer, such as I'll start mopping the floor, that gives you an idea that that person's judgment is impaired. Now, common sense really is about having good judgment. So we need common sense for many of our day to day activities. When what is needed is a simple solution to a simple problem, common sense is required. However, there are times, as we all know, when the problem is not simple, it is complex, it is complicated, it is convoluted. Problems like that defy common sense. And this is where we need wisdom. Consider this scenario. A young man has been promised by God that he will become the king of the land. However, the current king of the land, who initially took a liking to him, began to hate him and even tried to kill him on several occasions. It gets so bad that this king begins to chase him from one place to the other with some of his soldiers. And in the course of doing that, this young man at some point walks into the camp of the current king and finds him and all his soldiers sleeping. What would be the right thing to do in that situation? Or what would you do? I mean, if that was you. Of course, you know, I'm talking about David and Saul in the Bible. The common sense thing to do would be to kill him. But he recognized that this was not a common sense problem. And so a common sense solution, which would be to kill the king, would not have been the right thing to do. So we can see David's line of thinking here. He said to Abishai, who obviously had advised him to take the common sense approach, do not destroy him. For who can stretch out his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? Here are the important points to note. First of all, the proof of your wisdom is in the quality of your decisions. You are never wiser than the decisions you're able to make. The common sense thing to do may or may not be the wise thing to do. Sometimes the common sense thing to do is the wise thing to do. At other times, it is not the wise thing to do. So how can you differentiate between what is the common sense thing to do and what is the wise thing to do? Or how can you know how to follow the path of wisdom? The Bible says in Hebrews chapter 5, verse 14, that it is by reason of use that we are able to exercise our spiritual senses. And our ability to discern is determined by how well our spiritual senses are exercised. And the exercise of our spiritual senses happens almost exclusively in the place of personal communion. So, what is the bottom line? The bottom line is if you are a believer and you find yourself constantly making wrong decisions, the first thing to check is the constancy of your communion. Could it be that you have replaced it with something else? David knew when not to follow the path of common sense because he was often in communion with God, and as such, his spiritual senses were well exercised.